Today I'm going to talk to you about agent rejections and what they might mean for your story. Today's video is a collaboration with the lovely Julie from Pages and Pens. She is a dear friend of mine and we are somewhat excited to bring you agent rejections, even though this is one of those things that a lot of writers are afraid of. And Julie and I are here to talk about some of the rejections that we have received for our books and how they're really not that scary, and eventually, at least I have, pretty much become numb to them. If you're new here, hi, my name is Caitlin Duncan. I'm a traditionally published author and soon to be hybrid author. I post videos on Mondays talking about the writing process and all the bookish things, so be sure to like this video because it really helps the algorithm like me, and also subscribe and ring that notification bell if you want to know the next time I upload. With my part of this collaboration, I am offering a little different perspective when it comes to agent rejections. I have published 13 books with a traditional publisher, and I am currently out of contract and I'm currently getting rejections for a new project that I am querying. So no matter where you are in the process, this is not just for newbies, it is for seasoned authors as well. There's never any guarantee that you will get another contract, and I'm really trying not to scare you here, but this is just part of the process, and I'm here to tell you that you will get rejection at every level of this process, of the publication process, whether you are traditionally published or indie published. So learning to look at these rejections, as some of them can be helpful and some of them not so much, but looking at them as nothing personal when it comes to your books is one step in the process that you need to learn as a published author. So I'm going to go over some of the query rejections that I have received and the information that I take from these particular rejections. Now, I am not going to be listing any of the agents who have rejected me because I don't really want to. I don't think that's fair to be able to share publicly, and I think that this is all subjective. It doesn't necessarily mean the agent is a horrible person for rejecting me. Agents do have to work with the current clients that they have. They only have a certain amount of time to work with those clients in addition to getting new authors on their list. But if you are in the process of querying or are about to and you receive some of these types of rejections, I hope that I'm able to help you feel better about them and also find little nuggets of information to possibly find ways to move forward, whether that is just to let it go because you weren't for them, or if there is any information about your query letter, your submission package as a whole, your first pages, or even your book. So when we talk about rejections, there is what is called a form rejection, and a lot of agents have these because so many authors are sending their books to these agents. They really don't have the time to personalize every rejection. They do have, as I said, clients that they are working with, and they need to use their time wisely. They can sound really impersonal, and sometimes the tone on emails cannot sound so great, but once you receive a few of these rejections, you will sense a pattern when it comes to the words and the structure of sentences that they use, and also some of their sign-offs are very similar, and try to be encouraging in an impersonal way, if that makes any sense. In terms of a form letter with no personalization, as you get rejections, you will start to see a pattern with a lot of the wordage that is used, and usually it is very, very vague. And I have found that even though this is a form rejection, the amount of them that you do get could be indicative of how your submission package is working among different agents. So if you are getting these form letters with no personalization in terms of advice on how to make the book better, or specifically your first 2 pages didn't work, or I didn't like how you started off your chapter, whatever, it's important to look at these as a pattern but not necessarily look at them individually. Now I'm gonna run through a few of them here that I have received, and I'm just gonna pick out different snippets of the actual rejection. Usually they aren't very long. If you do get a long one, most likely it does have some advice on moving forward. forward. But here's one. Thank you for considering me as a possible fit to represent your book. I have reviewed your query, and at this time I do not believe I am the right agent to represent your work. Please know that we are extremely selective even with the materials we review. I do appreciate you thinking of us as an agency, and I encourage you to continue your search for an agent who is just the right fit for you. I wish you every success in your publishing endeavors. That last line is usually a common sign-off when it comes to rejections. Another one is, although I found your query interesting, I didn't quite feel connected to the characters as I had hoped. Due to this, I won't be asking to read more at this time. Keep in mind that publishing industry is very subjective, and what might not work for me may work for another agent. I hope you'll continue to learn and practice your craft. Thank you again for considering me. I do find a lot of rejections come with that as well. As I said, they want to be encouraging as possible, even with an impersonal letter that they really didn't write every single time that they reject. Another one, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to consider your project. I carefully read and considered each submission I received, and I'm sorry to say that yours is not quite right for me. Agenting is subjective, and while I couldn't take on your project, another agent may well feel differently. I wish you the very best of luck with your work in the future, and thank you for thinking of me. So that is another one that's a little more kind when it comes to their sign-off and how they are encouraging you to continue to query, and that it really just wasn't for them. And I know that's very difficult for some writers to understand, that every single person in the world is not going to love your book. Even when you do get published, you will have reviewers hate your book. Look at your favorite book on Amazon or on Goodreads or any of the reviews and go look at the 1 and 2 stars. They will be there. Books that are well loved do have people who do not like them. This is a part of the process that you're going to have to start getting used to if you want to be a published author. Now, in terms of what to do about these specifically, as I said, this may mean that there is something wrong with your submission package, something that isn't quite catching their eye, or, like I said, it could just be subjective. When it comes to a form letter with no personalization, I did actually submit to the founder of an agency, which I really knew was probably going to be a mess. Usually the founders of the agencies have been in the industry for years, and their current list is very full, and they're really just staying open to find that one special unicorn if they can. Obviously I didn't make the mark here. So this one said, I'm sorry I don't have better news. I am lucky to have a very full and active client list, and for that reason I've become very particular about taking on new clients. As I'm sure you know, publishing is very subjective, which is one of those key words that you really know it's a form letter at that point. And it's quite possible you'll find someone else who feels differently, maybe even here at this agency. I'm not going to reveal the agency name. I encourage you to review our submissions page to see if another agent might be a better suited for your work. And I really enjoy having that sort of encouragement, because sometimes agents at particular agencies work very closely with one another. So when you submit to one agent and they don't feel like they're the best person for the project, they will pass it along to the other agents at the agency, and that rejection could signify a no from the agency as a whole. So I do recommend doing your research as much as possible when it comes to agents. I do have a whole video on how I researched agents. I will link that in the cards and also in the description box in case you haven't seen that yet and are interested in how to even start the agent search. So as an example of that, here is a rejection letter basically rejecting me from the whole agency. Thank you for thinking of us with this project. Although we won't be pursuing representation, we appreciate the opportunity to consider your work and wish you every success with it. So I think that is very important to look at those particular ones when they say we and it's not a good fit for our agency. Look at the submission guidelines on their website. Don't submit to another agent at the agency. A lot of them, especially those that use Query Manager, are able to see the name of the author submitting and if they have submitted this project before, and it really just doesn't look great on your part if you don't really pay attention to the instructions that they give. So at this point, I would say move on. When it comes to form rejections that have a little bit of leading information on it, those are really important to look at individually and also as a pattern, as with the form rejections with no personalization. So an example of that is, after reading your submission with interest, I unfortunately found the sample pages just didn't connect with me as I would have liked. But that being said, I'm going to pass on this. Please know the publishing industry is subjective, yada yada. You get the idea. It's the same pattern that we've been seeing here. But it still feels nice to see that in a rejection. So at this point, I could think, because they specifically said sample pages, that maybe my query is working and that maybe I need to look at my first pages or however many pages I sent. Agents are wildly different when it comes to what they want with submission packages. Some of them just want a query, some of them want a query in 5 pages or 10 pages or 25 pages. This is just information that you need to think about when you receive these rejections. I wouldn't go crazy after getting one rejection like this and changing your entire first part of your book, which leads to changing your entire book, but I would look at it as a pattern. So if you see a few of these rejections coming through based on them mentioning your pages, that maybe they are worth another look. But I wouldn't rush into it right away with just one rejection that talks about sample pages. It really could just be another thing that's subjective and it's not for them. So the next one, I'm a big fan of the premise and setting of title, and there is much to recommend about the story. However, after careful consideration, I didn't connect with these opening pages as much as I had hoped. For this reason, I have decided to pass and step aside. So again, having 2 of those specifically really made me think about my first pages, and I think if I received more of these particular rejections, that I really would look at the first pages. But as I said, you have to be cautious when it comes to that, because this is still feels like a form, but they do have that specific information. I know some agents have many different forms based on these particular situations, so it's just something to think about as you have that specific information available to you, and then you can determine what you want to do moving forward. Another type of rejection, but also doesn't really feel like one, is when an agent passes your manuscript to another agent at the agency. This has happened to me twice already, and it kind of feels good to have this sort of rejection. So that particular agent wasn't really interested, but obviously they did read it enough to pass it along to someone else at the agency. Maybe they have someone who is very similar on their list in the genre or a type of writer, or maybe they don't have enough time to edit the book with you and want to pass it along. But that recommendation from that agent is really good when it comes to thinking about how your submission package is doing, because obviously if I was an agent and I was passing along a book, I wouldn't pass along a book that wasn't interesting to someone else, a colleague of mine. So that really gives insight to how your book is doing. So this one was very short but nice. This is to notify you that your query was forwarded to my associate name because it may be a better match. Thank you and good luck. And I have found that between the 2 that I have received, that they are very enthusiastic about doing this, about passing this book on to someone else, because for any different reason that they may not be able to take it on. I really liked having that recommendation, that sort of stamp of approval from one agent to want to give it to another one. The other one was, thanks for thinking of me. I shared this with my fantastic colleague name, and they're interested in giving it a read. And this is a situation, so the previous one was on Query Manager. When they do forward it to the other agent, you get a notification of that. And this one in particular was an email submission, so they CC'd me on the email with that new agent, so I was able to contact them. I sort of had that approval. I feel like I need to have that approval sometimes when it comes to going into agents' query boxes or their emails, so I had that approval to be able to approach that particular agent. Now, unlike the form rejections, a personalized rejection is one that you should hope to get. That is the point where you may be able to get a little more insight into your submission package, whether or not the query is working, or if there's something particularly problematic about your sample pages, or again, it may be subjective, but this is when you can have that information to see how you want to proceed moving forward. And as I mentioned before, look for these patterns when it comes to rejections, because you will probably get more rejections than you do requests for fulls and partials. It's just a numbers game. It's just part of the process, and me and Julie have discussed it many different times, and that we are very numb to the process now, but it is one of those things that I would prefer to to have a response at all, whether it's a form rejection, then having that no response means no when it comes to a lot of agencies. So this one reads, "Thank you for giving me the chance to consider title. Unfortunately, while you're a very good writer, as your credits attest, I wasn't sufficiently taken with the premise to feel that I would be the right agent for your work. And I felt that in this instance, the present tense was distancing. I asked that whether any of the other agents at agency were interested in reviewing, but it doesn't seem to be what they're looking for at this time." So we got some information in that one. So this particular agent obviously read the query, and I had put my publishing credits in there. And the part where you're a very good writer could be a little formy, maybe a little bit encouraging. And in terms of the premise, that is a subjective thing, and this agent not wanting to work on it could be subjective, or it could mean my book is crap. Who knows? And in terms of the tense issue, so this book is present tense, and the fact that this agent found it distancing was something that really struck me, and not necessarily in a bad way. It could be to do with, I don't really write many present tense books, and this may be something that I need to look at only if I get several other remarks about it or find that I'm getting more rejections than fulls. But at this point, I had already received 2 full requests, which I'll go into in a minute, and those agents had had my sample pages prior to that. So this is a situation where I have put this nugget aside, and I am going to just keep it in mind. And when it comes to any other rejections coming forward, this may be something, if I decide to pull this book out of querying, I may try to fix that particular issue. So having that information up front is good to know, but doesn't necessarily mean that my book is crap. As I said, I have received several full and partial requests at this point, and I did receive 2 rejections based on the fulls. Thanks so much for the opportunity to read title. There is much that is good here, and you are clearly a talented writer, but I'm sorry to say that I didn't fall in love. So I'm going to thank you for the opportunity and step aside to make room for another agent. The only problem I really have when it comes to an agent having a full is that, at least from my expectations, I felt like I should have gotten a little more information on why they didn't like the book. Now, when it comes to a full request, at least from my research, it seems like a lot of agents will give you information based on the book because they did take the time to read the whole thing, and usually because that requires more of their time, maybe they have more thoughts whether or not they want to be encouraging about the rejection. While I feel this wasn't necessarily a form rejection, I feel this one feels a little more personalized. I honestly just think the book wasn't for them. I think if there was something in particular that was problematic, that it would have been mentioned. That's just how I feel about the situation. Who knows what an agent is thinking, really? So while I wish I would have received a little more information on why this book wasn't for her, whether or not it was the tense or if it was the characters or anything like that, that would have been better. I would have really appreciated that a little more. But like I said, I'd rather hear something than nothing. I'm not gonna go into too much depth about the second full rejection that I did receive because I did receive more personalization, and there is a little bit of spoilers in that rejection that I don't really want to discuss because I really do want this book to be published, so I'm not going to discuss it. But what I felt like what was said in this rejection, I honestly don't think the agent actually read the full book. There was something that was mentioned that really didn't jive with the entire story. It was something that was exposed in the beginning of the book but then explained later in the book. And this is when writer friends are amazing, such as Julie and my good friend Katie. They are my 2 critique partners for this book, and I did bring this rejection to them, and they were so supportive. They're not the type to really sugarcoat things and, you know, try to boost me up as much as some writers do need, but I didn't take too much stock in the things that this agent said. I honestly think this book wasn't for her, and that's totally fine. So there's a lot of factors that go into any of these types of rejections. You really have to look at them subjective, away from the blood, sweat, and tears that you put on the page. As with all of these types of rejections, it is very important to distance yourself from the book when you're reading these. We all put our heart and soul into these projects that we write, and sometimes this process is scary. This process hurts. When I got my first few rejections, it hurts. It stings. After you start getting rejections, you get a little bit, maybe requests, or you get some more information nuggets coming out of your submission package. You start to get numb, and it just becomes part of the process. So I hope that in discussing ways that you can get through agent rejections, what agent rejections actually look like, and how you can apply that to your submission packages, I hope I released a little bit of the fear within you about receiving them. And I do hope that you hop over to Julie's video and check out her agent rejections. Like I said, we've been discussing these for a while, and we've become very numb to them, and we do send each other our rejections and are very supportive. So if you can find great friends like that, that's always helpful during this process. And if you're coming to me from Julie's channel, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed this video, do give it a like because it really helps me out. Hit that subscribe button and the little notification bell next to it so you know the next time I upload, and I'll see you soon.